thank you all for joining I guess it's our inaugural fair housing workshop put on by the City of Pleasant Hill in conjunction with Eco Housing. My name is Troy Fujimoto. I am with the City of Pleasant Hill. I'm the city planner. I will largely be turning over this presentation to Angie Watson Hajim, who is with Eco Housing. She is our expert. And so we will be going through a presentation. This fair housing workshop was meant both for tenants and for landlords, so there's something there for everyone. There will be question and answer sessions throughout. We will take short breaks to allow people to either type in or raise their hand. We'll call you in, or you can type in your questions. We'll read them, we'll answer them. We'll go through it through the presentation, and there will be places where we will stop. Then at the very end, if there's any other questions, we will have that available as well. So with that, I will turn it over to Angie, who is with Eco Housing, and she will get us going. Angie?
Yes, hello. Thank you, Troy. Good morning, everyone. So I am Angie. I'm from Echo Housing. And so many of you may not know much about Echo Housing or anything about Echo Housing. So I would love to just before I dive into our presentation, tell you a little bit about who we are and what we do. So Echo Housing is a nonprofit housing counseling agency. Now, we don't provide housing. Many times people will call our office and they'll say, put me on your list for your next one-bedroom apartment. I have to say, oh, I'm sorry, we don't provide housing. So we are basically counselors, and we help people in a number of ways to help them navigate around different housing issues that may come up. So like for my program, I work in the Fair Housing Department. And so in my job, what we do is we investigate discrimination complaints in housing. So people call up our office if they feel they have been denied housing because of their race, because of their religion, because they have children, because of their disability. I will investigate those complaints and see if there's any evidence of discrimination going on. We also do a lot of education to property owners and managers around fair housing laws, what's legal, what's not. We do mediations as well. We also have a tenant landlord department. And so in that program, we help both tenants and landlords know what their rights and responsibilities are. So, for example, we might have a tenant who calls our office. They'll say, my manager keeps wanting to come into my home without proper notice, or they keep wanting to come and do inspections. I got a rent increase, and this is not fair, or I have, mold in my bathroom. What can I do about that? The manager's not, returning my phone calls. So we often get issues from tenants that have those concerns that come up. And then also we work with property managers, property owners. They also have a multitude of issues that come up in their work. So a landlord may call us and they'll say, I have a tenant who hasn't paid their rent in 6 months. I have a tenant who's destroying the property there at my apartment. They're disturbing neighbors. So what can I do? What are my rights around that? So we help both parties know what their rights are and responsibilities. We also have a first-time homebuyer program, which is one of my favorite programs at Echo Housing. And in that program, we help people who want to become homeowners. So we have classes that we give out for free. You can come and learn about home ownership, how to prepare for it, how to get your credit rating up, what kind of down payment assistance programs are out there that could benefit you in getting, into your first home. So it's a really great program, really thorough information that you get around home ownership. Our most popular program, I would have to say, is probably rental assistance. We don't currently provide rental assistance in Contra Costa County. We only provide it in Alameda County. People who need help with their rent or getting a deposit, they can call us and they can, get help possibly if they qualify to get their rent paid up or get into an apartment. So that's a little bit about Echo Housing. We are based in 4 counties, actually 3 counties. We do work in Contra Costa County. We do work in Alameda County and also Monterey County. And so for our time today, I'm going to be giving you an overview of the fair housing laws. I'm going to talk about the federal laws, talk about the state fair housing laws. I'll talk about some common issues that come up that I think would be, important for you to know about. And as Troy said, we have an ability to take your questions. So on your Zoom, you should have a Q&A box where you can or chat if that's open, and you can just put your questions in that in those two areas, or you can raise your hand, like Troy said. And at certain parts throughout the PowerPoint, we'll be stopping for Q&A. Now, I can only answer fair housing questions. I won't be able to answer questions that deal with more tenant landlord issues about rent increases or evictions or habitability. We do have people on our staff that can answer those questions for you, but for my workshops, I just focus on fair housing. That's my baby, fair housing. So that's what I'll be doing. So what is fair housing? What are we talking about when we talk about fair housing? Well, simply put, fair housing is the right that all people have to live free from discrimination in any type they choose, any kind of housing they choose. I always say that if you have the income, you have the good credit, you have the good rental history, you should be able to live wherever you want to, regardless of your class, your characteristics. So fair housing is all about equal access to housing for everyone. That's kind of our mission, making sure that people have equal access to the housing of their choice. That's how we got started, by helping to make sure people had that accessibility to housing. Okay, so now I'm going to dive right into what we call protected classes. So all throughout this country, if you go to any state in the country, you go to Colorado, you go to New Mexico, Utah, you go to, wherever, Arkansas, Kansas, wherever you go in this country of ours, they're going to have these federally protected classes. And so what this means is that it is illegal for a property manager, for a property owner, for a leasing agent, anyone that's providing housing, it would be illegal for them to discriminate against someone based on these classes: race, color, religion, national origin, sex, which also covers sexual harassment. So it's illegal for anyone in the housing industry, anyone who's providing housing, to sexually harass someone. That's a federal offense. Um, Also protected are people that have disabilities. Now, people that have disabilities also have the right to ask for what we call a reasonable accommodation or reasonable modification. I would say probably about a good 30%, maybe even 40% of my caseload deals with people who have disabilities who need reasonable accommodations or reasonable modifications. We're going to talk a lot about that because it's a big issue that comes up for both tenants and property managers and owners. Also, people that have children in their household age 17 or under are protected also against discrimination in housing. So those are the classes that we have protection under federal law. Okay, so now I want to talk about disability. As I said, about 30%, maybe even 40% of my cases deal with people who have disabilities who call us for help. When I go and talk to property managers, I do a lot of trainings for property owners and managers and leasing agents. I always tell them it's so important to treat everyone the same, to be consistent, to be consistent, to be consistent, to be consistent across the board. However, if someone is disabled, they have the right, expectation to be treated differently in housing because of their disability. So people who are disabled can ask for what we call a reasonable accommodation. They can ask for a rule or a policy to be changed so they can live in the housing. Now, a classic example of an accommodation would be, a property manager has a no pet policy. Now, managers have a right to say, we don't allow pets on the property. The owner can say, I don't want pets. They're dirty, they smell, they cause problems. I don't want them. That's fine. Pets are not protected. People can decide they want to have pets on the property or not. However, if someone is disabled and they have an emotional support animal or they have a service animal, guess what? The manager, the property owner, the agent has to change that no pet policy, has to change that rule and allow the person who is disabled to have their emotional support animal or the service animal. Also, because these animals are not considered to be a pet, a manager can't charge a pet deposit. They can't charge pet rent. I know in Alameda County, where I do most of my fair housing work, I'm based in Alameda County. We're seeing a lot of managers ask people or tell them basically that you have to pay pet rent for your pet. You can have your pet here, but your pet's gonna be charged, $25 or more, a month for pet rent. And that's perfectly fine. But when it comes to these kind of animals, pet rent, pet fees, they're all illegal. You as a property manager owner cannot charge them for someone's animal who is the emotional support animal or service animal. Also, there's no breed restrictions. I know a lot of times managers will say, "Oh yeah, we allow pets, but we don't allow pit bulls. We don't allow Rottweilers. We don't allow German Shepherds. There's certain breeds they don't want to have on the property because those breeds are considered to be aggressive or possibly dangerous. And so they'll say, these breeds are not allowable. But if a person is disabled and they have a pit bull or a Rottweiler that happens to be their emotional support animal, guess what? The manager, the owner has to allow that person who's disabled to have that breed, if that is a breed that that person has for their animal. Also, there are no weight restrictions. So if you are disabled and you have an animal that's considered a dangerous breed, you still have the ability to have that animal based on fair housing law. Also, it's important to know there's many kinds of animals that can be a support to people. So it's not just dogs and cats. Now, usually when it comes to service animals, those are usually going to be dogs, and they're usually very well-trained dogs. I know I had a woman who I worked with in Alameda, and she was disabled. She had epilepsy, and she would have seizures. And she had the cutest little white furry dog, so precious. And the dog was trained to bark. So whenever she was about to have a seizure, the dog would bark. And so most animals that serve as service animals are usually going to be dogs. But when it comes to emotional support animals, they don't do a whole lot. They're just there to provide comfort to people that may be disabled, where they have a bipolar condition, or maybe they have anxiety, or they suffer from depression. So those dogs or cats are there to provide comfort. And so I've had many kinds of animals that come my way from my clients. Besides a dog or cat, I have had people that have had a turtle. People have had rabbits, birds. There was one famous case, not out of our office, but another office in our jurisdiction where a man had a snake. He had a boa constrictor snake as his emotional support animal. And the manager found out about it and she freaked out and told him he had to get rid of it. And so he actually, long story short, on this case, he was able to get help, legal help, from a nonprofit legal services agency, and they sued the manager because he was disabled and he needed to have the snake. It provided comfort to him. It kept him out of the hospital. It gave him a reason to get up every morning. And so this case went to court, and the judge ruled in favor of the man who had the snake. So I will say snakes are very unusual. It doesn't happen very often, but this is an example of the fact that many kinds of animals can be a support to people who are disabled. Also, sometimes people who are disabled need to have a caregiver. They need to have a caregiver to come in and help them with their cleaning, with bathing, with cooking. And so a property manager or owner would need to allow for a person who is disabled to have a caregiver. And also that includes a living caregiver. So you may be disabled and you need to have someone that lives with you. If someone is disabled and they need to have a caregiver, a living caregiver, the property manager, the property owner must allow that person to be able to have the caregiver. It's also important to note that the caregiver is not a tenant. The caregiver is simply an employee of the person who is disabled. So the manager can't say to the person who's disabled, oh, your caregiver must be on the lease. They must fill out this application, and I have to, go through a credit check with them and check the references. No, caregivers are not required to be on the lease, or not required to have to fill out the application or anything like that. They're simply there to provide a service for the person who is disabled. Also, breaking a lease. There are times that come up, and I've had this experience myself, where a tenant is disabled or becomes disabled, and they can no longer live on the property. They have to break the lease. And so the manager, the owner, should allow the person who's disabled to break the lease, to get out of the lease early so that they are able to find a place that's suitable for them. I know I had a case just a few months ago where a woman, she had moved into an apartment in San Leandro, and she moved into it last November, and she signed a 1-year lease. And the apartment had lots of stairs, lots of steps all over the apartment, and she could no longer go up and down the steps. And she was on the third floor, and there was no elevator. And so she could not live there anymore. And so she asked the manager if she could get out of her lease early. She signed a 1-year lease in November, but she needed to get out of the lease early to find an apartment that was on a lower level or had an elevator or had a place where there wasn't so many steps. And so the manager initially said, no, I'm sorry, you signed a lease, you have to stay here till your lease is up, or you have to pay a penalty to get out of the lease early. Sorry, nope, no deal. And so she called my office and spoke to me, and I was able to talk with the manager, the regional manager, and we were able to get her out of the lease so she could get a new apartment that was suitable to her. So there are times when people who are disabled cannot be there, cannot continue to fulfill that lease. They need to get out the lease early. Closer parking space. So sometimes it comes up where a manager, has a person who's disabled. Their parking space is very far away from where they live, and so the person who's disabled may ask that they be moved to a closer parking space. Now, sometimes parking can be very tricky because oftentimes there's not enough parking that goes around for everybody. So I would never tell a manager to take away a spot from someone who's able-bodied and give it to someone who's disabled. That wouldn't be legal. I wouldn't ask for that to happen. I would have the property manager put that person who's disabled on some kind of a wait list so that when the next apartment parking space becomes available, they get the first chance to get that more accessible spot. So, there are times that come up when a manager can't always accommodate the person who's disabled, but their obligation is to at least have a conversation to try and also to get help from Echo Housing because we do a lot of case management, counseling, education around disability issues that come up. But as a property manager owner, you need to at least try to make accommodation for that person who is disabled. Okay, next slide. Thank you. I now want to talk about reasonable modifications. So this comes up in fair housing when a person is disabled and they need a physical change in their home. So it could be they need to have a grab bar put in the shower or by the toilet, or they have a wheelchair or a walker and they need to have a ramp built to go in and out of the home where they live. Or perhaps they're deaf, they can't hear, and so they need a special light that goes off when someone's at their door. Or they need a light on the smoke detector so they know that when there's smoke, there's fire, they know and they can deal with that. Or it could mean someone having to having carpets pulled. I know I had a case years and years ago where a woman had an apartment and she had water wall carpet all over her apartment. And it turned out that there was some material in the carpeting in her apartment that was making her very, very sick. She would have situations where she couldn't breathe. She had to go to the ER. And so her request was to have the carpets removed so she could live there, she could breathe. So that was her accommodation, her modification request was to have the carpets removed. And the manager was really great. The owner actually was really great. He had the carpets removed. He had the maintenance person come in and remove the carpets for her. He was really good about it. I have never seen this, but it could have a situation where a person who's disabled needs or wants the counters in their kitchen lower. Maybe they use a wheelchair and they want to be able to use the counter space. They can't because it's too high. And so their request is to change the counters so that they're lowered. Now, my question is to you out there is, who do you think pays for that modification? Think it's the disabled tenant that pays for it, or is it the property owner that pays for it? So this is the question that comes up, as you can imagine. And the answer is that it depends. It depends on who owns the property. If it's a privately owned property, then in that situation, the tenant pays for the modification, pays for the grab bar to be put in, pays for the ramp to be built. If it's public housing, any housing that gets government monies that go to it, we have a lot of affordable housing organizations here in the Bay Area. John Stewart Company, Eaton Housing, Bridge Housing, Mid Peninsula Housing. There's so many different property management companies that provide affordable housing to people who are low income, and those properties get federal monies that come to that property. So in that situation, people who need accommodations and modifications, they would pay for it. HUD has many housing developments all over the country, and so anyone living in HUD housing, public housing, HUD would pay for that modification. But if it's privately owned, the tenant pays for that modification. Next slide, please, Troy. So verification. So it's really important that if you are a property manager and someone comes to you and they're telling you they're disabled and they are asking for an accommodation, you can ask them for verification. You can ask them to give proof that they are disabled. You cannot ask them what the disability is. So if I come to you, I'm a tenant, I'm disabled. You can't say, "Oh, Angie, what's your disability?" That would be illegal. What you can ask me is, you could say, "Angie, I need verification that you are disabled," and then we can go forward. And so I would go and get that verification, that medical documentation that states that I'm disabled and I need this accommodation. Now, it used to be years ago that only doctors, anyone that had an MD behind their name, only they could write a letter to verify someone's disability. That has changed. So the people who can write a letter that someone is disabled, that has augmented greatly. So it could be a doctor, it could be someone's caseworker, it could be their social worker, it could be their therapist, it could be their AA sponsor, it can even be a parent writing a accommodation letter for his or her disabled child. So it's just important to know that as a person, if you're providing housing, that it can be more than just a doctor writing a letter verifying someone's disability. Now, if a person's disability is obvious, someone is in a wheelchair, someone is blind, in that situation, no verification is required. Next slide, please. Now we're at our first Q&A. So as Troy and I said earlier, if you have questions, feel free to raise your hand. Feel free to put questions in the Q&A. And then Troy, you can just let me know if there's a question there. I'll be happy to try to answer it during this period of time.
Thanks, Angie. I will also note that we are live streaming this, so there may be people looking at this through YouTube. If you did have any questions, though, you will have to join the Zoom, and I believe that the Zoom link on the bottom and the QR code should be showing right now. So if you did have something you wanted to ask, you should hop on over to Zoom where you can type something, and otherwise, you're good where you are. So with that, I just wanted to share that because there may be some people watching on YouTube. Other than that, Angie, I don't see any questions as of yet.
Okay.
So
Okay.
I think we can move on. There will be other times for Q&A as well.
Yes.
So
Yeah, we'll have other sessions. Yeah.
we'll move.
So Troy, I can't see the screen
Oh,
again.
sorry. Geez.
Okay.
How about now? My bad.
let's that's no that's the Fair Housing Workshop flyer.
Yeah, so on the bottom there is what I was talking about, where there was
Oh,
the Zoom
sure.
info. So let me just, and the QR code, let me just leave this up for just a couple seconds since I
Sure,
thought I had it
absolutely.
shown, but I didn't.
Okay, okay, sure.
So you can see there the Zoom and then the meeting ID and the passcode. And if you want to be really quick, you can just scan the QR code and it'll take you straight to this. All right. So I will flash this up again later. So with that, I'll take you back to the presentation, Angie.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much.
All All right, there you go.
Okay. Okay, so next slide. After Q&A. There we go. Perfecto. So now I want to talk about children. um, there was a time where managers could say, sorry, this is an adult apartment complex, no kids are allowed. In fact, I remember back in the 70s visiting my uncle who lived in Hayward. I remember seeing signs outside of apartments saying no children. I remember that. I go, oh, that's so cool. They don't allow children. I remember thinking that as a kid. But that was very common years ago, where managers, owners would say, sorry, this is a quiet building or no kid building. That today, of course, is illegal, big time illegal. So children can live wherever. Any family that has children should be allowed to live wherever their money will take them, basically. Now, I have to say that, unfortunately, I don't see it very often where a manager or property owner tells a family, I'm sorry, I don't allow kids. I had that happen. This was maybe about 5 years ago. I was really surprised. It was a manager in Berkeley who told a family that he wouldn't rent to them because they had a small a child, a toddler. But most managers, owners today know that it is illegal to deny people that have children housing. But what we do see very commonly in fair housing when it comes to children, we see these issues here that you see on my slide. We see a practice called steering. That happens quite a lot. Steering happens when a property manager owner puts all the families with children in one area of the complex, and all the people that have households without children, they are living in another section of the property. I had a case years ago when I first actually started working at Eco Housing where an owner did just that. He was doing major steering. At least he was having his property manager do major steering. So in the back of the building, you had all the families with children who lived there. In the front, you only have people that were single households or households that didn't have kids. And that owner actually got sued because we did some testing and we found this was going on. And people who made the complaint wanted us to sue the owner. And so that's one thing we do. I didn't talk about this earlier, but when we get a fair housing case and we do an investigation and we find good evidence, we will help our client if they want to pursue a case. We will help them get an attorney to file a lawsuit on their behalf for discrimination. And so that happened in the Steering case. It was in San Leandro, and the owner got sued because he was not allowing people that had children to live in the front area of the apartment. So that is illegal. And it is a practice that happens. Sometimes we see managers will say, oh, we only allow kids on the bottom level of the apartment because we don't want kids upstairs because they're going to make noise, they're going to run, play ball. And my neighbors are going to complain. I don't want to deal with that. So if you have kids, you got to be downstairs. And that is illegal. You can't do that in housing anymore. Also, what we see are different rules that managers have around kids. So we have it in the rules, things like, kids can't play ball, kids can't ride their bikes, kids can't rollerblade. What I tell managers is that when you have rules, those rules should be in place for everyone. So they shouldn't single out children. So if you don't want people riding bikes on the property or rollerblading or skate riding around, don't single kids out. Just say residents can't ride their bike, residents can't rollerblade, residents can't skateboard, residents can't loiter. You don't want to single kids out. And we find managers doing that. Also, managers have rules like, kids can't be in a laundry room, or kids can't be on this part of the property. Kids should be able to use the facilities and be anywhere on the property as their parents are, as their guardians are. You shouldn't have separate rules for kids as to how they move around. In the property. Now, you can't have safety rules for kids. So, for example, if you have a pool on your property, you can have, and you should actually have it posted that any child 14 years of age or younger should have an adult with them at the pool. That's part of the Health and Safety Code of California, and that should be posted. Also, if you have a gym on your property, you can have it posted. Any child 14 years of age or younger must have an adult with them at the gym because gym there's heavy equipment. A child can hurt themselves, so it's logical, it's reasonable to want to have an adult there with the child. The child's in the gym, but to have a rule that says kids can't be in the gym, or this is a pool for only adults, or this is a pool for kids, or kids can't be in this area. Usually that's going to be illegal, and you're not going to be able to get away with having that rule. It's going to get you in trouble. So allow kids to be in the gym, allow them to be in the laundry room. Maybe they're helping their mom and dad do laundry. And, a lot of kids do. Yeah, they do that. So, allow them to live there peacefully and enjoy the amenities there as their parents do. So also, I want to talk about restrictive rules. Now, it's summertime, it's July 30th, summertime. Kids are still out of school, kids are home. Usually in summertime, I get calls from, parents, from caregivers saying, oh, my manager says that my kids have to have me outside with them when they're playing. I have to be out there at all times when they're outside. And that is looked at as being overly restrictive. Many kids can play outside safely by themselves without having their parent, their caregiver out with them. Now, if you do have a child that is causing havoc, you have a kid throwing rocks at people's windows, the kids are, trampling over all the plants and flowers and, making lots of noise. So if you have children that are causing a problem there, you can always deal with bad behavior. You can always go to the parent, the guardian, the caregiver and say, hey, your child is destroying property, they're causing havoc. But if a child is outside playing and they're playing safely, they're not disturbing people, let them play. If the parents are okay with the kids playing outside, let them play. Don't have them have their parents out there with them. That is looked at as being over restrictive to parents. Also, I want to talk about the 2+1 occupancy guideline. Now, this is not a law, but it is a guideline, and it deals with the number of people that should be allowed to live in a rental unit. So, for example, the way the 2+1 works is that a manager owner should allow 2 people per bedroom plus one extra person. So, if you are a property manager and you have one bedroom apartments available at your apartment, you should allow 3 people to live there in that apartment, two in the bedroom plus one. It could be 3 adults, it could be 2 adults and one child and 2 adults. It doesn't matter what the age configuration is. You should allow 3 people in the household. If you have a 2 bedroom apartment that you're renting out, you should allow, based on 2+1, 5 people, 2 in each bedroom plus one. This is just a guideline. It is not a law, but I preach this a lot. I talk about it a lot because the Department of Fair Employment and Housing, they're now called Civil Rights Department. They changed their name a couple years ago. They're the ones that put out this 2+1 occupancy guideline. And they did it because they want to make sure that larger families had access to housing, because larger families tend to have children. And so when you have very restrictive rules around your occupancy, it's going to impact families that have children. And so that's why it's a fair housing issue. That's why we implore that our property managers and owners, they go by the 2+1 occupancy guideline. If you choose not to, if you say, nope, sorry, we only allow one person per bedroom or 2 people per bedroom, that's it, you could open yourself up to an investigation by the Civil Rights Department. They're the ones that made this policy, and they want people to adhere to it. And they will open you up to an investigation if your guideline is less than 2+1. So I always tell people, all my property managers and owners, as a good policy, it's a safe harbor, go by 2+1. It's just a good sound business practice for you. And it helps you be in alignment with fair housing. Next slide, please, Troy. So I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but I want to just briefly talk about criminal records history. So I know in the county where I do most of my work out of, which is Alameda County, we passed ordinance back in 2022. And so property owners and managers are not able to run a criminal background check on any applicant. They can't do that. However, in Contra Costa County, if you're a property manager and owner, you can do a criminal background check on anyone trying to rent property from you. That's legal for you to do that in Contra Costa County. But HUD wants you to have some reasonable guidelines. So first of all, they want you to look at convictions only. You don't want to deny someone housing because they've been arrested, because being arrested does not mean that you're guilty of anything. Anyone could be arrested, it could be perfectly innocent. So you want to look at convictions only. You also want to look at how long ago that conviction happened. So if it was more than like 3 years ago, I think in most areas, you should not hold that conviction against the person. If it's been a more recent conviction, depending on what the conviction was, you might be able to do that. You may be able to deny them housing. Also, you want to look at the nature of the crime. So, someone who assaulted their partner is different from someone who wrote a bad check. So you want to look at the nature of the crime, look at what the conviction, when a conviction happened. You want to have those reasonable guidelines in place if you are a property management company that does do criminal background checks. And so I do have a little a PowerPoint just on criminal history. So if people after the webinar today they want to contact me, you'll have my contact information, and you want to get more in-depth information about this, if you really have a real interest in this, I could send you that PowerPoint. But I just wanted to kind of give you just a quick overview of the criminal records history stuff. Troy, next slide, please. Oh, we're at our next Q&A. So are there any questions out there? Happy to try to answer them for you.
I don't see any questions or any hands going up.
Okay,
So once again, we'll have more opportunities for questions. So why don't we keep on going?
great, wonderful. Okay, so now I want to talk about California law. Remember that first slide that I showed you? It had all those protected categories, federally protected categories, race, color, religion, all that. So those are the federally protected classes. So every state, as I said, has those protections. And in California, we have some extra accommodations, extra protection under our fair housing law in California. So what you're looking at right now on your screen are the classes that are protected under California. So we have marital status that is protected. So people cannot be denied housing because of the marital status, because they're married, because they're not married. I had a case a few years ago where a woman, she saw an apartment complex that was being rented on Craigslist. And she saw the apartment, she loved it. The price was right, and it was an area that she was interested in moving into. So she called the person who listed the apartment and said, "Oh, I saw your apartment on Craigslist. I'm interested in coming down to see it." And the person said, "Yeah, I'm the owner. It's still available. Come on down, check it out." And so they made an appointment for her to come down to see the apartment. She goes down, to the apartment and meets the owner. And one of his first questions to her was, "Where's your husband? Where's your husband?" And she was very perplexed. She did expect that question. She said, well, I don't have a husband. I'm not married. I'm single. And he said to her, "Well, I really prefer to rent to a married couple." So that was definitely a blatant case of discrimination. And she filed a complaint with us. She ended up dropping the case, but that's illegal. A property manager can't decide that they want to only rent to people that are married. That is illegal. It used to be also years ago where a manager could say, married couples, they would say this actually, married couples can combine their income to meet the income guideline. But if you are just roommates living together, you have to make the income guideline separately if you're not married. And so this marital status protection eliminated that. So what managers have to do now, anyone 18 years of age or older in a household that has income, all of that income should be combined, whether they're married or not. So that is what came out of marital status. Source of income is also protected. So I remember years ago, people used to put ads in the newspaper for rentals, and I remember seeing things like no AFDC. That was very, very common. And AFDC was the name of the welfare program in California years ago. Now it's called CalWorks. But I would see people listed in their ad, no AFDC or must be employed. Today, that would be illegal because you don't have to have employment to have an income or to be a good tenant. People could be on Social Security. They could be getting child support. They could be on disability. I have a friend who is her source of income is alimony. She pays her mortgage through alimony checks from her husband. So, and that's legal income. So there's many ways that people provide money in their lives to provide for them to live. And it's not just people who have a job that can do this. So we want to make sure that marriage owners know that a person coming to you doesn't have to have a job. They have to have income, yes, and legal income, but you can't dictate where the income comes from. Ancestry is similar to national origin, so manager owners should not treat you differently based on where your family originates from, whether it's China or Africa or Mexico. That's what that ancestry is. It's very similar to national origin under the federal law. Also, people who are members of the LGBTQ community are now protected against discrimination in housing and harassment. There are many states you can go to in this country where if you are gay or you are lesbian or you are bisexual or you are a trans person, you could legally be denied housing. In California, fortunately, we do have this protection that allows for people, no matter who they love, to be able to access housing of their choice. Also, people who under gender identity, people who are transgender, people who are non-conforming, people who are non-binary, who are gender fluid, people have many ways they just describe their gender. And so they have protections also now in California against harassment in housing, against discrimination in housing. These are newer protections that we have here in California. Also, we have this protection, which has never come up in my work. It's called genetic information. So it has to do with situations where, let's say, you were born with type 1 diabetes, or you were born with sickle cell anemia. That's a genetic a genetic disorder that you were born with. And let's say a manager owner got wind of it, found out that, oh, you have sickle cell anemia, oh, you have type 1 diabetes, we're going to deny you housing. That person would have the ability to file a complaint with Echo Housing because they were denied housing based on their genetic information. This law is basically mostly used under employment law. So like employers can't deny someone house or cannot deny someone employment because they have some kind of genetic disorder. Because sometimes employers think, well, I don't want to hire someone that has sickle cell anemia because maybe they're going to get sick a lot and be in a hospital and miss work a lot. So this is mostly, I think, it's mostly emphasized under employment law, but we also have it stated here under our housing law here in California. Also, citizenship immigration status is also protected. Now, we all know what's happening under the federal law here. We know a lot of immigrants are being targeted. A lot of things are going on a federal level here in our communities. But in California, we still have citizenship immigration protections for people. So if you are a property manager, property owner, you cannot, under California law, deny someone housing, treat them differently in housing, deny them services, deny them things based on their immigration status or their citizenship. We do housing work in areas, including areas like Concord and Salinas, even Hayward, where I'm based out of, where there are a high number of immigrants that are living in those areas. And we have in the past had people call who were immigrants. And they would tell us, or they're undocumented, they'll say, my manager said if I complain about the mold in my kids' bedrooms or that they're not fixing things in our house, our apartment, they're going to call ICE on us. They're going to call the police. So unfortunately, this is behavior that we have sometimes seen with some property managers and some property owners. It's egregious, horrible behavior, and it has happened. I'm sure it will continue, but it is illegal in California. So what I tell my property managers and owners is that you are not ICE. It's not your responsibility to decide who's here legally, who is not. You're here to provide clean, habitable, safe housing to your residents, regardless of their immigration status or of the citizenship status. So this is also still part of the law, and we still adhere to it. We want the property managers to adhere to it as well. Gender expression is also protected. So let's say someone is a woman who is very masculine in the way she dresses, the way she talks, the way she behaves, and maybe a manager owner feels uncomfortable with that and doesn't want to rent to her because of the way she expresses herself, her gender. That woman would have a reason she wanted to file a complaint with Echo Housing based on discrimination on her gender expression. Also, people who are part of the military, active members of the military, people who are veterans, they're also protected. Now, most of us have a pretty high opinion of people who go to the military to serve our country. We feel like that's a great sacrifice. We appreciate their work, or people who are veterans who've served. But not everybody feels that way. So someone could be anti-war, it could be anti-military. They don't want a person living on a property who has served in the military or currently is serving in the military. Well, that service man or woman, that veteran would have the ability to file a complaint with Echo Housing for discrimination based on their military or veteran status. That is a newer protection that we have here in California. Also, primary language. A manager or owner cannot say to a tenant, you must speak English here. And I know the president recently he wrote cited an executive order saying that English is the national language of the country. In California, we don't have a statewide language. People speak many languages here in California. I think like 200 some languages are spoken here in California. It's amazing. There was a case down in Los Angeles a few years ago where an owner who owned a building, I think it was might have been San Bernardino area. I don't remember the exact area down in California, but somewhere down in SoCal, he had an apartment complex and a building where a lot of the people who lived there were Spanish speakers. And he told them, I'm sorry, you cannot speak Spanish here on the property. You are in America now, and you need to learn English. And he actually told them that they could speak English on the property. Well, I guess someone got wind of it because someone ended up suing him, and you can imagine what happened. So we have this protection. People have a right to speak whatever language they choose. Now, if you're a property manager or owner, you're not obligated to have all your materials translated into Spanish or Mandarin or Arabic, but you would have to allow your Arabic speaking, tenant or Spanish speaking tenant to be able to use an interpreter to help them communicate with you. But you don't have to go and get all your leases, all your notices all translated into that particular language. You don't have to do that. But you do have to allow people to speak the language that they feel comfortable speaking in. You can't dictate what they speak. That is their choice. Also, Section 8 is now protected. So it used to be just 5 years ago, before 2020, an owner manager could say no Section 8. Section 8 is a voucher program that's administered by the federal government. It gives people ability to take their voucher and to rent apartments where they don't have to pay the full rent. They can pay just like I think 30% of their income on the rent. It's a really great way to provide low-income housing, or to provide low-income tenants with safe housing. It's a great program. And for many years, owners could say, sorry, we don't take the voucher. We don't accept it here. And what would happen, a lot of people, they have the voucher, end up losing it because they couldn't find anyone to rent to them. And the voucher was only good for like 3 months or something. And then if they couldn't find someone to rent to them, the voucher went back to the housing authority. So now, as of 2020, owners and managers are obligated to treat people who have the voucher as if they're anyone else without the voucher. Treat them the same, give them an opportunity to rent there. It's also important, I want to say that there's a new law that went into effect last year. I think it was last January, SB 267, SB 267. And that law deals with folks who have a voucher. It deals with their credit. So normally, if you are a property manager owner, you can say to a person who's coming to rent to you, you must have good credit. If you have collections on your credit, if you have, evictions on your credit, if you have, low credit score, we're not going to rent to you. But when it comes to people that have the voucher program, this new law that went into effect changes that for them. So if someone comes to you, they have a voucher, they have poor credit, you cannot use their poor credit to deny them housing. As long as they can show that they can afford the rent, you have to rent to them. So this is a new law, a lot of property managers still are not aware of it. We're trying to do education to them around this new law around credit history for people that have the voucher. Also, one other thing I want to say about Section 8 is that if you have someone that comes to you and they have a voucher, you can still have your income guideline. You can still say you must make, 3 times the amount of rent to live here. That's fine. You can use that same income guideline on people who have the voucher. But you want to remember that people that have the voucher, they're not paying the full market rent. They're going to be paying a portion of their income on the rent. So you want to look at their portion of the rent that they're going to be paying and base your income guideline on that portion. So for example, you may be an owner and you have, this great 2-bedroom apartment in Pleasant Hill that's available, and you have an income guideline where you say you must make 3 times the rent in order to live here. So if I wanted to rent that apartment, I'm going to have to make, a lot of money to live there. However, if I'm on Section 8, let's say my portion of the rent is only $300, then I'm only obligated to have to make $900 a month to live there. So you want to base that income guideline on the portion that Section 8 person is going to be paying, their portion, not the market, because they're not going to pay the market rent. They're going to pay just a portion of their rent. So now I also want to talk a little bit about arbitrary discrimination, and that's kind of like the umbrella that I talk about sometimes. I talk about it as an umbrella. So under this umbrella, we have these other classes that are protected, not enumerated under the law, but they are still protected. So things like age, occupation, political affiliation, personal characteristics. So people who, let's say they have body piercings, they have tattoos all over their bodies. They should not be denied housing based on how they look. Or someone should not be denied housing because they're very young. There are times when I have gotten calls, not a lot, but I have gotten calls from younger males who feel like they were like discouraged from renting. I think that some managers, owners think that young males are going to maybe be irresponsible, gonna throw wild parties on Saturdays, not pay the rent. And so they have this stereotype in their mind that, oh, we shouldn't rent to a person who's a male who's 22 years old. That's not going to be a good fit for us. That is discrimination. That's discriminatory. It's illegal. So you don't want to use the person's age to determine if they're going to be a good tenant or not. Or someone could be very elderly. It could be someone who's 90 years old. A manager thinks, oh, they're 90. They may fall. They may break their hip. What we're going to do about that? They live by themselves, or they may forget to turn off the stove or whatever. So, we all have biases, and as property managers or owners, you have them too. And that's normal. It's part of who we are as human beings, but you don't want to act on your bias. You want to make sure that anyone coming to you, if they're 90 years old, if they're 19 years old, if they got body piercings, if they, have a, political affiliation different from yours, that doesn't matter. You want to look at, can they pay the rent? Can they be a good tenant? That's what you want to look at. That's what you want to make base your decision on, is your ability to be a good tenant and to pay the rent there. So that's what I want to say about arbitrary discrimination. So we have lots and lots of protections in California for people who are out there looking for housing or who currently live in housing. Next slide, please, Troy. So we're talking just a little bit about child care. So under the law, managers can say, it's legal for them to say, you cannot run a business in your rental housing. This is just for you to live here, not for you to run, a business doing people's taxes or making dinners for people or doing people's hair. You can't run a business in your apartment, in your house. There's an exception though when it comes to licensed childcare. So if you are a licensed childcare provider, you are allowed to run your business in your rental housing if you're licensed. You don't have to have insurance. Although most providers do have insurance, every childcare provider that's come to our office for counseling, they have had insurance. But the way the law was written, they don't have to even have insurance. They can just have a affidavit letter written by all the parents of the kids who are in that daycare saying that we understand that our child care provider doesn't have insurance and we're okay with it. So they can have that or they can have insurance and be bonded. The child care provider is totally responsible for the behavior, for the safety of those children in daycare. So if the children are causing a nuisance, they're causing a problem there, then that child care provider is going to be on the hook for that. They're responsible, making sure those kids are going to be well behaved. Of course, there's going to be some noise, they're kids, but it can't be to a point where it's causing a nuisance to other people who live there in the community. So they're responsible for the way that child care business is run. Also, the provider, it used to be they can increase the deposit for the child care business, but now that's no longer acceptable. So you can't do that. You can't charge a higher deposit for someone because they have a child care business. That was okay up to last year. The law changed recently around that. So that's it that I want to say about child care. Next slide, please, Troy. So we're at our Q&A. Any questions out there?
Angie, there is a question.
Oh, good.
The question is, if someone is denied housing with a voucher, who can they contact to seek assistance?
Good question. Well, they can contact us, Echo Housing. So we are the fair housing agency for Contra Costa County, also for Alameda County as well, if anyone is listening from the county that I work out of. Yeah, so that is our job. That's why we are in business. Make sure that these kind of things don't happen. When they do happen, we want to stop it. We want to make sure that owners and managers know that it's illegal for them to deny housing to someone because they have a voucher. Vouchers are now protected. People that have vouchers are protected as of 2020 when Governor Newsom signed SB 326 into law. So if you have a situation where you are facing discrimination because you have a voucher, you'll have our contact information. I wouldn't be the person you'll be talking to. I don't do work in Contra Costa County, but I will refer you to my colleague that does. So they can reach out to you, do an intake with you, and help you in that situation. So definitely we're your people to contact.
All right, thank you, Angie. And another question is, are there regulations regarding Section 8 tenant contacts with law enforcement? For example, if there are multiple contacts with law enforcement for noise disturbances, party, music, fighting, can Section 8 tenants be evicted?
Yes. So just because you have a Section 8 voucher does not mean that you can't or you're not allowed to, you're allowed to be a nuisance, basically. That's what I want to say. So it doesn't permit you to be a nuisance to someone or to allow you to have wild parties or to not pay the rent. Um, any person who is protected and protected class, they still have to follow the rules there on the property. They still have to be a good tenant. They still have to pay the rent. They still have to get along with their neighbors. They still have to take care of the property. That doesn't change because you have that protection. So I hope that answers your question. So yeah, you would have to follow the laws there, whether you are protected or not.
All right, I don't have any other questions, so why don't we move on?
Okay. Okay, so I briefly want to talk a little bit about what housing providers can request. We haven't done it in a while, but in the past, we have sometimes done workshops for people who are seeking housing for the very first time, people who are coming out of the, foster care system, for example, and they're trying to, find housing, people who just never had to look for housing before. We would put these workshops together for them so they would know what to expect on their search for housing, on that journey of finding housing. And so on the slide here are some things that a property manager owner can and often will request from you as a person looking for housing. They may ask to see your bank account information, your bank statements. They often will want to find out what kind of credit rental history you have. If were a good tenant where you lived before, you paid your rent, you didn't cause a problem there. They want to do a landlord reference on you oftentimes. They want to check for your income. They want to make sure that you have appropriate income that's legal. You have enough of it. So they're going to look at your income, verify that. That's legal for them to do that, of course. They're also most likely going to ask you to put money down to run a credit check. So if you have situations where a manager is saying, well, you have to pay us, $45 for a credit check. That's legal. They can do that. Now, if you get denied, if you pay for your credit check and you get denied that apartment, you have a right to have a free copy of your credit report if you paid for it. You have a opportunity to get a free copy so you can see why you got denied. You can look at it and see what the problems were on your credit check, on your credit report. But you will be most likely charged for a credit check. Also, a manager can ask for personal references. They can say, hey, I want to talk to your employer. Yeah, I want to talk to your clergy person, your rabbi, your imam, your minister, I think where you go to church. They can do that. I don't see that happening. People usually don't go to looking at personal references, but it is legal if they do it across the board to everyone. They can actually ask for personal references. They can also do a check in your home. And this doesn't happen very often, but every now and then I find, someone calling me saying, I went to his apartment, talked to the owner, and they want to do a check on my apartment. They want to see if I'm a clean person. Is that legal? Well, it's not illegal. They can do that. They do it across the board for everyone. If they only look at certain people's apartment to determine if they're clean or they're tidy, but not other applicants, that would be discrimination. But if they have a policy where they go to everyone's apartment where they live, check out their home, they can do that. It's a lot of work for them, but it is legal for them to do that. Next slide. So now I want to talk about advertising. Advertising is a fair housing issue. So if you are a property manager owner and you have housing that you were trying to rent, and let's say you use Craigslist or you use Facebook Marketplace or you use Zillow, there's many ways that many platforms people use to put their housing out there for the public to see. Now, it's really important that when you put that housing out there for the world to see, that you don't have discriminatory language in your advertising, because that would be illegal. You don't want to have the things that you see here on my slide. You don't want to have that in your advertising. You don't want to have things like professional working people preferred. What if people are blue collar workers? What if they're a janitor? If they're a bus driver? Would they not be a good tenant? Would they not be welcome on your property? So when you put words out there like that, it could denote to some people that, oh, I wouldn't be welcome. Oh, people who are my profession wouldn't be accepted. And that's just not what you want to convey. You want to have your housing available to everyone. You don't want to put language in there that maybe people think that they might not be welcome there. And of course, we know now source of income is protected. So you can't put working people preferred, because people may not have a job, but they may have, income coming in. You don't want to put not suitable for children. Even if you have, a complex where you feel like, oh, it's on a hill, or, we have lots of, water around our complex, or, this apartment that I'm renting out is near the pool. It doesn't matter. You don't want to put things like not suitable for children, because it's up to the parents to decide what's going to be suitable for their kids. Also, things like perfect for young single adults. What about people who are older, or people who have, partners who are married? So once again, just looking at this, these classes or these things here, you want to just look at that and say, I don't want to have this in my ad, because it denotes that certain people may not be accepted. And like I said, you don't want that to happen. You want to have housing that is going to be out there for everyone. So when you think about putting your housing advertising out there, just talk about the property. You can say, 2-bedroom apartment, walk-in closets, bay windows, sunny kitchen, near public transportation, near the local college. Just talk about the amenities of the apartment, the neighborhood, but not the kind of people that you want to attract. One thing I do want to say before we go on to the next slide, that where it says male, female preferred, if you are an owner and you're living in a home, and let's say you have one room in your home, you're renting out, you can do what we call a same-sex preference. So if you are a female, you have one room in your home, you're renting out, you can put in your ad, female preferred. If you're a male and you have one room in your home renting out, you can say male preferred. That's only if you have one room in your home that you're renting out. If you have more than one room you're renting out, you can't do a same-sex preference. I just want to put that out there. But look at this list here and don't do it. If you're putting out your ads out there, you don't want to have any of these things in your advertising. And also, I want to say if you are a property manager or owner and you do have a question about what you should put in the ad, feel free to call Echo Housing. I know that in the past I've had people who've called me and say, "Hey Angie, I have this rental that I want to put out on Craigslist. Can you read my ad? Make sure that it's nothing illegal." I have a friend who's looking for a roommate and she asked me to read over her ad, make sure she have anything that it was illegal. And actually she did have something that was illegal. I had to tell her to not to put it in the ad. So she was surprised by that. But yeah, so you can definitely call us if you have a question about your ad and you want to get some feedback, you want to get some help in writing up your ad. We'd be happy to help you do that. Absolutely. Next slide, please. So this is our last slide, and this is my 9 magic, magnificent manager tips. A lot of M's in there. So over the many years I've been working in fair housing, I've talked to many property managers and property owners and leasing agents about their challenges that come up in their work. And so based on our conversations and things they've brought to me, their concerns, I have devised my 9 magic, magnificent manager tips. So these are just some tips I put together. It's not an exhaustive list at all, just some food for thought. If you are someone that provides housing, this may be of help to you. So one of the things I would say if you are a property manager owner is to let your applicants know your criteria. If you know that you won't rent to anybody that has a low credit score below 580, or you won't rent to anybody that has a bankruptcy that's been in the last couple of years, or eviction. Let them know that, because otherwise they end up putting money out for an application fee, for a credit check fee, and they're not going to get the place. So they know your criteria, they can determine this is something they want to pursue. So let people know what your expectations are when it comes to who you are able to rent to. Also, have a good non-discriminatory question or non-discriminatory answer to the question, what kind of people live here? I talked to many agents who have said to me that they take their applicants or their potential applicants, tenants on a tour of the property, let them look around, take a tour. And sometimes the people turn around to the agent and ask them, who lives here? What kind of people live here? And they're kind of stumped. They don't know what to answer. And I just say, have just a blanket answer, like, all kind of people live here. Anyone who applies, who qualifies, lives here. I would not, as a property manager, get into a conversation to that prospective tenant as to who lives on your property. I wouldn't be talking about, oh, we have lots of veterans that live here. We have lots of, kids that live here. We have lots of whatever. If people are curious as to who lives there on the property, let them come back on the weekends, after hours, people are home, and they can see who makes up the neighborhood. I would get into conversation personally as to who my tenants are. Let people know why they're denied. If you cannot rent to a person, don't just, not return their phone calls or follow up with them. Let them know, I'm sorry, I couldn't rent to you. I had to deny you housing because, your credit score was very low. You didn't have enough income or whatever. Let them know. Because sometimes people will go away thinking that they were denied for some unfair reason, for discriminatory reason, when maybe it wasn't the case. So if it's a legal reason as to why you deny someone housing, let them know that. Let them know why you can rent to them. Put all rules in writing. Now, most of my managers and owners that I work with today are very good about putting rules in writing, but some of my smaller mom and pop landlords are very informal, and they sometimes will put rules not in writing, but they'll just say them verbally to their tenants, and that's just a bad business strategy. I think that you should just really make sure that whatever rules that you have, your small landlord or a large one, doesn't matter, have everything in writing, and make sure your tenants get a copy, and then you keep a copy, and it's signed off on that, so they know, they're very clear in writing what they can and cannot do on the property. So that's just a good policy. I like to see things in writing for everybody. One of my most important, I think, really important rules here, tips here, I would say, is to have a good open door policy. I cannot tell you how many times that we have gotten calls from tenants in Contra Costa County, in Monterey County, Alameda County, where they say things like, my manager never returns my phone calls, never returns my emails, my text messages. I don't know how to get a hold of my manager. My manager doesn't, respond to me. And so, what I want to say to you, if anyone out there who's listening, who is a property manager, who is a property owner, who provides housing, you want to treat your tenants as customers because they're paying money and many times a lot of money to live there on the property that you rent. Make sure you listen to them. Make sure that you let them know that they can come to you when there's a problem, when there's a maintenance issue, they have a question. Make sure they know how to get a hold of you. There's an emergency, if not you or someone else. So having that good communication really sets a good tone for every property. When managers, owners have good relationships with their tenants, guess what? They have happy tenants and there's a happy environment for everybody. So having a good open door policy, good communication, it's just paramount to having a really good place to live and work for the manager and the tenants. So I really encourage everyone to look at how they talk to the people they went to, how they get back to them, when they get back to them. It should be, when someone asks a question, has a problem, you should respond within 48 hours, 72 hours at the max. And that's what we do at Echo Housing. People call our office, we try to get back to them within 24 to 48 hours because that's about providing good customer service, getting back to people. And that should be your, what you want to do. It should be a goal if you are in the business of providing housing to people. Also, keep good documentation. So, if you are a property manager owner, you probably know that it's a little more difficult now to evict tenants. Tenants have more protections down here in California. So, if you do have to give someone a notice to vacate, you want to be able to have a reason for that. And in most jurisdictions, you must have a just cause reason to deny them or to tell them they have to move out. So, if, for example, you have to give someone a notice because they haven't paid the rent, make sure that's documented. You want to give them a notice because they've had wild parties for the past, 18 Saturdays in a row and they disturb all the neighbors. You want to have that documented. So if you do have to, go into court, if you get a call from an attorney, get a call from one of my colleagues, myself, about why someone was asked to leave, you want to be able to say, this is the reason, this is documented problems I've had with this tenant. This is why they're being told that they have to leave. So for your protection as a property manager owner, be really good about documentation when it comes to your tenants. And also, I would say to anyone who rents property, if you are having, for example, you're being harassed by a manager, by your owner, you want to document that in case you have to file a complaint against that harassment. You want to be able to document things that happen, when and where, times and dates. So documentation is good, certainly for people who provide housing, but people also who are tenants. It's good to have that good documentation. Also, treat everyone the same. Now, I was talking earlier about how as human beings, we all have our biases. We like people differently based on what we have in common with them, who we feel comfortable, what the rapport is. It's just natural. But as a property manager owner, you can like certain tenants better than others, but you can't treat them differently. You want to make sure everyone gets the same level of service. You don't treat one family better because you think they're really cool, because they're big fans of your soccer team as you are. You don't want to have that kind of differential treatment. Being across the board, equal treatment is what we want and what everyone should expect in housing. Also, keep getting educated. Different laws are put into place, different ordinances are put into place. And so if you are a property manager owner, I encourage you to every year, get trained. Come to my trainings. I do trainings every month, actually. So if you know people that may be benefiting from this kind of work, this kind of education, they can contact me and I can let them know when our next training is going to be in a few weeks. So keep getting educated. If you are a property manager and owner, it's really important to keep up with all the different laws and everything. As I mentioned earlier, we also do tenant landlord counseling. That's a whole other category. Lots of rules and laws and things under that law. So, we can also give you a training on different things that are going to be really useful for you when it comes to tenant landlord law here in California. So fair housing, tenant landlord, get trained, keep yourself up to speed of all the new changes in the scape of landscape of fair housing and working in the housing industry. Also, get help when needed. So if you are having a problem, if you're a property manager, you're having an issue with your tenant and you need help, call. I had a woman who called yesterday from Contra Costa County, actually. She called and she said that she was having a problem with her tenant and she wanted to get some help. So we do provide mediation, we provide counseling, so definitely reach out to us if you need help. I love it when our property managers contact us because that tells me you care, we're not just here for our tenants, we're here for everyone, making sure they understand housing and they get help that they need. So definitely get help as you need. Next slide, please, Troy. This is our last one. Oh, second to the last one. So Q&A. So last chance, everyone out there, if you have any questions, of course, you can contact me after. But if you have any questions, it's the time to ask them now.
There's just one question. I can show your website, which is ecofairhousing.org. It's fairly straightforward.
So this is me here, and I'm the Fair Housing Coordinator. This is my phone number to the main office. So you can reach me here. Also, here's my email, Angie at ecofairhousing.org. So if you want to email me, you can do that, or you could call. Now, I know this is a Contra Costa County focus, so I don't do fair housing in the area, but still definitely give me a call anyway because I can refer you to the appropriate person. But Tomas Ortega is actually the fair housing counselor for Contra Costa County. He's not on the call today, but he's the person that would handle your fair housing concerns. So if you want to call him directly, definitely feel free. This is the phone number, and this is his email address here that you can contact him through email, or just call me. You're welcome to call me as well. Yeah, I can refer you to him. Also, I don't think anyone is on a call from Monterey County, I don't think, but this is our contact person from Monterey County in the Tri-Valley area, Livermore, Pleasanton. We do housing in that area, and Tanya is my colleague that does housing there. And we also now just recently started doing housing in Davis, the beautiful city of Davis. So we're spreading our wings here at Echo Housing. So that's us, that's me. Feel free to contact me if you have any question. Maybe something will come up to you later on during your lunch break or tonight and go, oh, I should have asked Angie that. There's my information. Don't hesitate to reach back out to me. So I hope that you found this webinar helpful, insightful, and I bid you well. And thank you, Troy, for making this all possible for me to be here this morning.
Yes, no problem. Thank you, Angie, for providing all this very helpful information. We will save this webinar and have it available for future use. So if anyone wants to go back and hear it, watch it, we will put it on our website, City of Pleasant Hill website. Should be up in a couple of days. And I would just note that while ECO is a great resource, here at the city, we don't have a robust housing group. A lot of housing inquiries or concerns go to the Contra Costa Housing Authority. They serve that purpose for us. But if you do have any questions, our phone number is 925-671-5209. But as Angie mentioned, ECO is a great resource. So she provided your information, but I don't have any other questions. I don't see any hands raised. So Angie, I thank you for your time, and I thank everyone for attending and listening. Hope you all found it helpful. With that, I'm going to end it, and thank you all. Thanks, Angie.
Thank you, Troy. Bye, everybody.